was going to do like this to swipe to the next. But this talk I will share some experiences from a couple of months of work in Denver. And it's really a talk about hope. But we also have to understand the seriousness of the situation of the state of affairs for this planet. Science gives us a decade. And this is what it looks like. For 10,000 years since the last great icing, we've been having a stable climate, and this stable climate is about to end. And the Earth is about to leave this. We have some planetary boundaries, and we have crossed them or about to cross them. And in 10 years, we have to change direction on this. So transforming a city is very important because some 60% of the population on Earth lives in cities, and this number is growing. So transforming cities is key to save the planet. And the city in itself is a graspable entity. So if we can work with one city and transform that, other cities learn, and cities learn from each other, and we can create momentum, and thus we can actually change the trajectory of the planet. But that is the urgency that really has to happen, but there's also a dream. And the dream is, how do we want to live in the cities or in the world? And when you ask people in Denver, in the city we're working with, you have a word cloud of things that comes up, and you can have many more words. But this is the kind of city we dream about, the kind of city we want to live in. And working in transforming a city, we have to work with both these at the same time. We have this urgency of planetary boundaries, but we also have this dream of what kind of society we want to live in. Now, to talk about how we deal with this, I would like to go back to a very basic thing in the trade we are in. If we work with service design, we have this now. Now is when change happens. Now is what we design for. We can call it different things. We call it touch points or other kind of wordings we have. But if you take the guy up to the right, for example, he lives in what we can call a food desert. There's no grocery stores around there, and typically economical situation is difficult. So this guy comes home from school hungry in the afternoon, opens the fridge, and wants to eat. So what will go down the throat of this guy? That now is what goes down. Is it soda, chips, those kind of things, or is it nutritious food? Now, if we design for that situation, it might be nutritious food. If we don't, we know what's happening, and child obesity is a big problem in many cities, and definitely so in Denver. You have many more nows. For example, if you take the lady down to the right, she's washing her hands. Now, how do you go about washing your hands? If you think about it, you turn on the faucet, and you get some soap, and you work it into your hands, and then you rinse in the water, and you turn off the faucet. But you could also do, the working in of the soap with the water faucet turned off. And the quantity of water that you use in that process is dramatically different if you work in the soap without the faucet running. Now, some sensor technology then can, help us with these kind of things. Or you could have sensors that measure how you behave, and they can text you SMS and say, washing your hands, you waste a lot of water, why are you doing that? So designing for these nows, this is where change happens. When you have a customer journey for a particular context over time, designing this for one kind of target groups, this, when you take a whole city, it aggregates to millions and millions and millions of touch points over time. And if we design them well, aggregated, that creates this force that will transform the city. So there's not one thing, there's no silver bullet. It's just consistently designing well for nudging behavioral change. Design is about nudging for behavioral change. So this is our task. Now, doing that in a city, we talked about complexity earlier today, and the city is a complex beast. You have the city in itself, you have the mayor, you have chief of staff, you have some directors, you have managers, you have thousands of people working in departments and different agencies. But you also have actors outside the city that are important in this puzzle. For example, responsible for the water, responsible for electricity, responsible for collecting the garbage, and transportation and much more. You have the corporations, of course, that are active, and you have millions of people in a major city. So all this is what we have to work with. And city leadership is about aligning effort. That is what this is about, what we have been doing in Denver. And I will go in a little bit about how we do this, how we organize for change in a big city. Step one in this is to organize executive directors. And executive directors, they talk to each other, of course, but the city is organized, so this executive director is responsible for this and this, maybe have hundreds of people, thousands of people working, in that department. Another director is responsible for this, and you have some 15 directors of this kind in a city, all responsible for their silos, if you like. And the difficult thing here is that when you talk about transformation, many of these things are cross-silo. So it's not just about one director having to change in that department, is cross-silo, so many executive directors have to coordinate and work together with this. So the first thing you have to do is to organize these directors, and in Denver we did it, we call it pillar structures. We created, if you like, 5 tables. So you take a couple of directors around one table, a couple of directors around another one, and so on. So this is complexity management, basically. And you have houses and small offices, you have utilities, you have mobility, traffic and mobility, you have city services, and community and well-being. Those are the 5 pillars we selected in Denver. And the thing here is we get these directors to come together once a month and sit down and focus on these issues. So we have the highest level decision makers in the whole region of Denver coming together once a month at each table, focusing on these issues of transformation. And that is huge. That is really huge, and that is key to have this structure in place. Now, step number 2 then is goal alignment. In Denver, as in many cities, you have the long-term goals pretty much down. In Denver, we have 2020 goals, and we have some 2050 goals, and they are both on the planetary boundary side, but they are also on the how do we want to create a society where we are inclusive, where we, all these things we expect from a good society. So they are pretty well down. Now, the next level, when you come down to intermediate goals, these are distributed out to these executive directors and further down into management levels. And this is where you have some disalignment often. So maybe a long-term goal on the strategic level for the city, when it's broken down, it will be distributed on 3, 5, 7 different departments involving many of these executive directors. And there is not always, but sometimes disconnect, and we don't really understand how they relate to the long-term goals. And this is the first thing that we have to change. We have to align those goals so we can see what aligns to, if you want, for example, air quality or greenhouse gases or water issues or what have you in these child obesity, you can have affordable housing, all these kind of things. So you have to, breaking them down, you have to see which one of these are contributing to the next level. Then, of course, one level down to when you have the more fiscal year kind of operation or the planning for the next fiscal year. When you do this goal alignment, you will discover that in some areas we're doing pretty good. In some areas we do not make enough progress, or we don't even have plans for making progress. These are what we call gaps. So that is step number 3, is to identify these gaps. And of course, if we do too little effort and we have to make, we have a goal that's out here and there's not enough effort, what do? Well, we have to create ideas to fill that gap. And this is what this process is about. So it's not a general project generation process, it's a process for filling the gaps of these long-term goals in a structured, organized way. Now, with these ideas, you put them into a light, efficient process. Remember, this is not a project, it's a refinement process to create projects. It's a project generator, if you like, a project generator to close the gaps. So I will go through that really quick, how this process works. The first thing is so interesting, and that is just to articulate the contribution. I guess everybody in this room have been in situations where you say, yeah, we have this problem with traffic congestion. And then the first idea is, we need a platform. Big data is the solution. Like, wait a minute, I mean, that was a big jump, we have traffic congestion and we need big data. How is that connected? And this is where service design plays so well in this, that we start to articulate the contribution of this idea. We articulate the idea and the contribution. And bringing that to these directors, it's not the directors that work with the ideas, they are decision makers. We bring the ideas to them and we say, hey, we looked at this and we think if we do this and this and this project idea, it would really contribute to traffic congestion if we look at that. And they say, yeah, that sounds great, and we make it easy for them to say yes and continue. In the next phase, you go a little bit deeper, you can articulate things like target groups, context, and you move on into this process a little bit more in detail. You also identify things that you have to assess a little bit further. It could be regulatory things, it could be governmental kind of things, it can be technological things you have to assess, and so on. So in this deeper articulation, you come to the table then and bring an idea and say, we have looked at this a little bit further. This idea, we think, really will fly. It will attack the gap that we are targeting. And we think that in the next step, in the assessment phase, we should investigate a little bit of these issues. Remember, still it's not the project. It's still just a light, efficient project. And you go back and you collect the right people and you iron out a little bit of these issues you have to look. And you come back, and the fourth phase then is a proof of concept, which you can do in many different ways. A proof of concept can be, for example, piloting something in a neighborhood related to child obesity. But it could also be that you go to another city and look what they have done, and you can say, I mean, they've done it in Seattle, there's no reason it cannot work in Denver. I mean, circumstances are the same, so that could be a proof of concept, and then we bring it back and say, yeah, we think this will work. The green circle here then is the decision where these executive directors, and remember, these are the highest level decision makers in the region that now are working with service design. So we help them and inform them to make good decisions, and they say, hey, this is really, really great, so let's make a project. And let's make a project is then the signal to push this into the budget process, because that's when you need significant financing and all kind of things. And running those projects, we know the difference now is that we have really well set up projects that we know we will attack those gaps that we need to fulfill the long-term goals of the city. With executives, it turns out, as we've heard also earlier today, that all the tools that we are having, storyboards, is a great way of conveying a story. You can, witnesses. You want people to pull off and park the car and take the light rail, pendeltåget, to town for work. So you talk to people and you realize, they want the coffee and maybe be connected to, and it's a desert when you park your car. There's no coffee, there's no Wi-Fi, nothing. So people, and these kind of hurdles, you make these huge investments. And these small things, like coffee and Wi-Fi, can be the thing that makes people either pull off or continue on the highway. And so using these kind of stories is very effective. But also remember to work both with the emotional part and with the data factual fact parts of the argumentation. And as service designers, we're really good at that. We can work with both those categories in an efficient way. Customer journeys are wonderful. Touch points are easily understood. And so that's a wonderful thing. But also what I've learned over the years working with executives is that they get it, and they get it quick. No offense if there's any directors in here, but the attention span of a director is really sometimes short. So you might have 10 minutes to convey your idea. And we spend a lot of time and pride in doing field work and research and so on. So we want them to get it the way we do. But that's not how you work in these kind of decision-making processes. You have to convey your story very efficient and use these kind of tools in a very light, efficient way for them. If they ask you questions, it's not that you are sloppy. It's just that if they ask you questions, you can go deeper. But you know the story, and they say, yeah, I get it. Really great idea. How do you want to move forward? We want to do this and this and this. And they say, thumbs up, and you're good to go, and you can move forward in the process. So there's no silver bullet. So if you work this way, you know, when you take one project idea and you start to break it down, we all know what to do with one project. So now we have a well-targeted project, then we have 10 well-targeted projects, then we have hundreds of well-targeted projects over a decade. And we have a decade, that's what we have. So this is the nudging force, if you like, that can push the planet into its boundaries again, but also the nudging that can create the society we want to live in. And this process is what we have started to do in Denver. We are, of course, in the very early crawling kind of stages, but so far, aligning executives for transformation is indeed possible, and I think it's necessary for this transformation of the major cities of the world. And one thing also we have learned in this is that if you want to get alignment with these executives, you need the big boss to say, this is important, now line up, let's do this. And this is not because executives are not, you know, intelligent and understand, it's because they have a day job, they have so many things to do. And if you try to bring them into a process and they have this day job calling and there's no really strong support from the mayor, chief of staff on that, it will be very difficult to have 16 executive directors, you know, moving and learning in this process, because it's a learning process for them too. But my experience so far is that it's really possible to do this. And it's also my learning from this that service design for executives works extremely well. Many of us come into project a little bit late in the process when the projects have been set up already, and we are frustrated. Why are these decision makers starting projects on these, you know, false premises? They talk about platforms. What about the users? What about this? What about that? And we are frustrated. But now, with this, we sit at the table with the highest level decision makers. There's no excuses. It's us, service designers, making them competent to make good decisions and move forward to close those gaps for the long-term goals they have. And for me, this carries a lot of hope. And the hope in this is not only about Denver, it's about cities being aware of this. If you look at smart, sustainable cities and you Google it, you will see that you have hundreds of cities in India targeting this, many cities in the United States. Stockholm is now announcing, like, really moving forward in the smart, sustainable process. My fear when I read about these things is that it's a lot about sensors, it's a lot about technology, it's a lot about big data. All those things are exciting, yes. But if you jump from we have a problem to big data, that leap is too long. And this is where we as service designer, I think, come into play and can play a very, very important role. The route is always now. And this is what we learned from the beginning, going to school and learning this trade. And this doesn't change. The thing is that we take this now and we stretch it all the way up to the highest decision makers in the region. And we organize it in a structured way to create hundreds and hundreds of projects over a decade. So that's all I have to say. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.